What is up, guys, and welcome back to another video. So in today's video, I'll be giving you guys some of my best tips to win more fights in Fortnite Chapter 2 Season 7 and for future seasons. This video is going to cover a variety of tips and tricks that you can use to improve in fights and to play more consistent and just give yourself the upper hand against even some really good players. If you go on to enjoy this video, be sure to drop a like on it, subscribe if you're new and want to see more content just like this in the future, and finally consider using code Teckoh in the item shop if you want to show some extra support, as it really helps your boy out a lot. With all that said though, and without further ado, let's get into the video. The first tip for this video is an absolutely critical one, which is to find a consistent early game spot that offers everything you need for a good game. As you might expect, coming out of early game with good loot is really important, and being able to fight just a few players early on and then rotate out with good loot is a must if you're looking to win fights consistently. Obviously, you have tons of options when it comes to drop spots. One that I personally love is Sweaty Sands, or Believer Beach as it's called, since one of the NPCs sells a shotgun every game, either a blue pump for 50 gold, a purple pump for 100, or a gold pump for 250. It also has another NPC which sells some sort of AR, usually from blue to gold as well, which is obviously really helpful to have. But even though that can be really beneficial in mid and end game, Sweaty Sands is still super contested this season, so you definitely don't have to land there unless you're super confident in your off-spawn fights. Overall though, the moral of the story here is to just find a spot with good loot and materials that you can land at consistently, learn the ins and outs of the spot, and you should generally come out pretty stacked, allowing you to win more fights and perform better in the later stages of the game. Moving on from that, guys, my second tip for fighting well in Chapter 2 Season 7 is to prioritize getting insane aim. At this point in time, almost every good player you're going to run into is going to know the basics of high-level gameplay. Most players can make piece control plays, crank out some retakes, but one of the main differences between pro-level players and the average player comes down solely to aim. Now, obviously, you can practice your aim in a ton of different ways, but my personal recommendation is to do aim duel matchmaking. The main reason I recommend this as opposed to something like out of game like Kovacs is 1, because every player is able to do it, and 2, because you don't have to go through the hassle of switching between apps. Obviously, to run Kovacs on high FPS, you would have to close Fortnite, open Kovacs, then close Kovacs, and then hop back on Fortnite. To actually do aim duel matchmaking, the process is incredibly simple. Hop into Raiders 1v1 aim map using the code up on screen right now, and then hop into the little matchmaking portal once you get in there. Then after a few seconds, you should be sent into a game with a random player, as you can see on screen, and you'll be able to do any aim duel scenarios you want with them. Overall, these scenarios can help you with all sorts of aim, from close to mid-range, shotgun fights, shooting at someone who's gliding, etc, etc. There's no specific set time that you should spend in Raiders map, as it really just depends on how much time you play and how much your aim is struggling, but I generally recommend 15 to 20 minutes for most players. Many pros are going to spend like 30 to 45 minutes doing aim duels every day, but 15 to 20 should be just fine if you're not at the absolute top level competitively yet. During this time, try to use a variety of weapons like SMGs, shotguns, ARs, and try to mix up the scenarios as well so you can get the most well-rounded and effective practice in the shortest amount of time. Aside from Raiders map, you can of course use Kovacs Aim Trainer to improve your aim if you're on PC and you're able to buy it from the Steam store, and I have plenty of videos about Kovacs scenarios if you want to give it a shot. It's an incredibly useful thing to have, especially if you're willing to put the time in, and mixing both aim duels and Kovacs should make for some insane aim as well. With that said, moving on to tip number 3, this is a really important tip that many players seem to overlook, and that's proper material usage. In my time VOD reviewing and coaching players, I see a constant pattern of players using the wrong builds for this situation. For example, if you get beamed in a fight, your first instinct should be to use a hard material like brick or metal and get into a safe position. That's common sense, as brick and metal have way more HP than wood, but I see far too many beginner to intermediate players using wood in these types of situations, and as you might expect, that makes it super easy to get sprayed or attacked. On the other hand, I see a lot of people using brick and metal for things like cranking up in a build fight, where those builds are most likely going to cover them for about half a second before they continue building up. Obviously, if you're just trying to build up fast and gain height, there's no need to use anything except wood unless you run out of it, since those builds are just really quick, tiny bits of cover. Obviously, brick and metal are more meant for long-term cover or something like a hard tunnel that you need to build. So overall, guys, just try to be conscious about which material you're using in each situation, and that should help tremendously when it comes to saving materials and performing better in fights overall. Not to mention, you're also going to be saving your harder materials for later in the game when you're actually going to need them. But tip number 4 for this video, we've got another really important one, and that's practicing against high-level players. This isn't really an in-game fighting tip on its own, but rather a tip that carries over into games when you do it. One of the most important things you can do to improve as a fighter and play more consistent in Fortnite is to practice fighting against extremely high-level players. That way, the average player you run into in a game is much easier to kill compared to the players you're usually against. What I recommend doing is joining a scrim server, maybe something like Open Scrims or G2 Scrims, which is formerly known as Atlantis, and basically just start looking for a 1v1 realistic. Chances are you're going to get some DMs and be able to go against a bunch of pretty decent players who can give you some valuable fighting experience, fights. Most players that are looking for 1v1s in that server aren't quite pro, but are pretty good. If you're not quite an advanced player yet and you tend to lose most of your fights in general, another option you have is to queue into matchmaking, basically by hopping into a realistic 1v1 map and entering one of the matchmaking portals. From my experience, the players in there are actually surprisingly decent and can give some good practice. The map that I personally recommend is Finest Realistic 1v1. I'll put the code up for that on screen right now. And all you have to do for matchmaking is simply hop into the map and then go enter the little matchmaking portal, which should be over on the side. Basically, from there, you'll be placed into a 1v1 with a completely random player, and you're going to be able to play it out for 10 rounds or until someone decides to leave. You can also keep re-rolling after each 10 rounds and get a ton of 1v1 fights in against a variety of different players, pretty much at the click of a button, which is why I really like this form of practice. Finally, guys, moving into the fifth and final tip for this video, and this tip is to VOD review your fights. I know I talk about VOD reviewing quite a bit, but let's be honest here, the majority of you guys still aren't doing it. Yeah, I'm talking about you, David. By the way, I don't actually know any Davids that are watching this video. I just kind of find it funny that I just scared the crap out of some random guy. Sorry, David, I didn't mean it, bro. But with that said, guys, VOD reviewing your fights is absolutely critical and something that I don't find enough players doing. Taking 5 minutes to hop into replay mode and figure out what got you killed can give you some incredible insight and help you figure out your biggest weaknesses when it comes to fighting. The thing is, when it comes to a video like this, there really aren't that many tips relating to actual fighting that I can go over that'll relate to every single person watching. We all have different strengths and weaknesses, which is why VOD reviewing our own gameplay is so important. That way we can figure out exactly what our weaknesses are, and after that, develop a more specific plan to improve those weaknesses and thus become a better player. For example, if you watch your replays and realize that you're missing a ton of shots when you're in another player's box, then you can use that information and start doing more 1v1 aim duels or watch videos on shotgun aim to figure out other methods you can use to improve. If you're struggling with fighting off spawn, then maybe you can practice more realistic 1v1s, land at your spot more often, and maybe try to nail down like a precise loot route so you can get better loot than your opponents. Overall though, when it comes to winning more fights, one of the most simple yet effective things you can do is to simply look back at your own gameplay, as that's one of the best ways to find your weaknesses in the areas that you need to work on. That way you can figure out how to actually improve in those areas and become a much better player in turn. But with all that said, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this video on how you can win more fights in Fortnite. Hopefully this video helped you out and gave you some really useful tips as to how you can improve when it comes to fighting. If this video helped you out, be sure to drop a like on it and consider subscribing as well if you want to see more videos just like this in the future. Finally, be sure to let me know down in the comments which videos you want to see next on the channel. I try to read as many comments as possible, and I'm constantly looking for new ideas for new videos, so definitely let me know what you want to see down in the comments. With that said, thank you all for watching this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.